Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Flying Goat Farm podcast with me, Lisa Check. Today is our season 3 creativity wrap up. But first, here's what's happening on the farm. I'm recording this in early March, and our biggest happening on the farm is that tomorrow is shearing day. We will be shearing everybody today. Our sheep get sheared once a year, and that's usually the first weekend or the first week in March. And our goats get sheared twice a year. So they get sheared in early March and they also get sheared in early September. The goats grow about an inch a month on their fleeces, but the sheep, it takes a lot longer than that. Just looking at my wool fleeces for my sheep, oh, they're just so wonderful still. Just to remind you, we have fine wool sheep. So we have Cormos. We have one BFL left, Henrietta. But we have Cormo BFL crosses that combine the best of both worlds. They have very fine fleeces from the Cormo, but they have a little more length and luster from the BFLs. So tomorrow's going to be a hard day. It takes a lot of work. Emily is our shearer, and I love that it's a girl power day. Oh, yeah, we need Bill to help us too. But it's mostly girl power day. She will get here early in the morning and set up her rig. Bill gets the animal and is like the staging area. I am picking up the fleeces from the ground after they're done and then skirting them, table skirting them. So what that means is that I pull off any of like the poopy parts or anything that is really could be matted, like sometimes by their legs or around their necks. There may be some parts that are a little bit more matted that are going to be harder for the mill to work with. So I pull those off and then sort them into bags to go to the mill. Usually, we really downsized this year, but we have been getting about 100 pounds in our clip. I'm imagining we'll get somewhere between 60 and 70 pounds of our wool this time. And we'll probably get about 50 pounds, 40 to 50 pounds of mohair. So that's what's happening on the farm. It'll be nice. It's always great to see them all clean shaven and starting from scratch. And Sunday, it's supposed to be warm. Sunday and Monday, it's supposed to be warm. Usually we keep the goats inside the barn for at least a week because it typically hasn't been warm after we've sheared, and they don't have as much fat on them, so they need to stay inside. The sheep, as I have said many a time in various places, my sheep are fat. And so they have plenty of insulation. So they can just go out onto the field. Of course, they can always come back into the barn and hang out in the stall, in the sunshine, by the stall doors and all that. And so nobody is getting too cold. So today's episode, I'm just really going to do a recap of where we've been and all the things that I've talked about as far as creativity in this series. In episode 1, we talked about creativity myths and realities, the fact that everyone is creative, that it's part of our human rights and our human nature, that we can strengthen our creative spirits. And in each and every episode, I gave you a creative exercise. I hope some of you did them. I keep asking people to share their experiences, and so far, either everybody is really, really shy or nobody's doing them. But I hope that you did take some time to do them. In this episode, you'll have everything all right here at your fingertips so that you can go ahead and do these. And a lot of these are can be seen as writing exercises, so you can document them in a notebook or a journal. And some of them are exercises that you can do with your phone or your camera, a sketch pad, that kind of thing. And of course, if you end up doing them, no matter what time it is, whether this is next week or next year or in 5 years from now, if you're listening to this way down the road, I am always excited to hear your experience. So let me know. So, our first exercise was to make a list of all the ways that you art in your life, because we talked about how art is a verb. Art is about making and making things that creating something that's never been done before, never been seen before, never been done by you before. So, making a list of all the ways that you art in your life, and that could be um, you could be arting in your culinary practice when you make dinner or lunch or breakfast for your family, or it could be that you have found very artistic, creative ways to do your job, whether that is something in engineering, something, for me, for being a teacher, is always being creative. You're always having to reinvent the wheel and do something new. And of course, it can be um, making, weaving a shawl or knitting a hat or drawing a landscape. All different things like that are ways that you art in your life. And when I did this, it was really neat to be able to see there were like 40 or 50 things on my list. And it really gave me a sense of balance and a sense of, look at all the ways that I do bring creation into my life that are not things that people would typically call quote unquote artistic. In episode 2, I tried to debunk the feeling of, yeah, I do this hobby, but I'm not an artist. And I really started out with talking about how our society used to be one where everybody arted. You were making your bowls, you were making your homes, you were making your clothing. Um, Everyone in the society, everyone in your village, everyone in your family, everyone was um, creating as a way of life every single day. Um, I don't know when it changed, but probably somewhere like in the Greek or Roman times, when all of a sudden society put the painters and sculptors up as the only artists of value. And they became kind of heroes of the society, especially if you look at people like Picasso, Renoir, Monet, Rodin. People, have put them into such a space as, put them way up on a pedestal as not being able to be attainable by any mere human. But again, I talked about we can build up the muscle that we have let kind of go to waste or get flabby, if you will, because that we don't think that we're artists and we don't think that we have talent. So the exercise for episode 2 was I asked you to go window shopping, and that didn't mean you had to go to a mall or to a shop at all, but really merely to go out and look for beauty in your neighborhood. It could be at the farmer's market. It could be at a mall. It could be like our little cute downtown Frederick is very picturesque with a little creek and lots of neat water lilies and places that have great photographic images that you can do. You could, for me, I like taking photographs, but you could also document if you're someone who prefers to do writing. You could go on this little journey and you could document it in a written piece or a poem. If you're like me, you can take some photographs. You could bring a sketchbook. And I also suggested this is a really great family activity. Nearly everybody in a family now has a phone that is capable of taking photographs, Or if your kids don't, you can share your phone and let them take photographs. And it's a way to like start the dialogue of um, why did you take that picture? What did you like about that picture? Um, what was intriguing to you? Those kind of things to like build up this creative muscle within everyone in your family. Episode 3 was so much creativity, so little time. We are all living really busy, busy lives, even during the pandemic, which is now winding down. But there was there was a time, and maybe it's still happening in your house. It's still happening in mine, where people who have outside jobs are working inside the home. If you have children, hopefully they're back in school now. But there was a time when everyone was at home and everyone was doing work and school, and there was just like very little time left over. Um, and I think nerves got a little frayed. I know mine did. And so I know that I can't be alone. But we talked about finding time in our busy lives for creativity to really eke out some time that's just for you, and how having a creative practice does not mean that you need to set aside an hour or even a half an hour. You can set aside 5 minutes or 10 minutes, something that is yours and yours alone. In this episode, I also introduced you to the committee. And those are the voices that are in your head that say various things like, well, this is what mine says. Mine says, who do you think you are? Um, you can't draw. Why are you even trying? That looks like a preschool drawing. I mean, all the things that you think, someone in your life, past or present, might be saying to you. They're termed the committee. Sometimes they even have an embodiment of a particular family member or a particular teacher in school, or it could be a particular artist who you really admire and would like to work with, or maybe you've worked with them in the past. And you have what you think they would say in your head. And basically, I talked about how it's just really important to tell them to go away, just get out of my head, get out of here, shut up, and go away. Especially if you only have 5 or 10 minutes, it's really important to make sure that you aren't listening to those voices. We talked a lot about work-life balance. Again, bringing your family into some of these exercises and having this as a family activity, as something that's fun, something that is that brings connection and more community within your community. The exercise this time was to pick a color. You could pick it for a day, you could pick it for a week, and to document that color in some way, whether that's photos or sketches in various tints and tones and shades. You could be finding that color in your house, or you could be finding that color in nature, pulling out, all the things in your kitchen that are blue. If you have a blue pot, you have some blue bowls, and cups or mugs, things like that, arranging them in a photo or a sketch and documenting those. It's really fun to do. And you can do it several different times. This is something that can go on throughout the year, picking different colors for that week or that day. So episode 4, as I pulled out all my cool books out of my creative library, just as a note, anything that I suggested in this podcast was my recommendation only. I do not get any compensation from any of these publishers or authors. And so I don't even remember, something like 10 different books. And the exercise this time was I pulled something out of the Twyla Tharp book, Her book is called The Creative Habit, Learn It and Use It for Life. She is a modern dancer and a choreographer. And so this one was using your body. And this one was really, really fun. So the premise is that you write down 10 verbs. Try to not think about what you're going to do with it after, but to write down 10 verbs and then to act them out using your body, using dance. And again, I can see this would be just a great family activity as well. It wouldn't be something that was like charades, but a little bit in that vein. So, you're using your creativity, your mind, and your body to act out what this might be, whether it would be like cooking or swimming or sketching or anything like that. So really fun. And hopefully you were excited about the books that I gave you as resources. A list of those books is available on my website, flyinggoatfarm.com. So episode 5, 6, and 7 were episodes where I talked with some of my friends who are raising or have raised really creative kids. And so these 3 episodes were all about their experiences raising creative kids. So in episode 5, I talked to Dallas of Dancing Leaf. She raised 3 boys. So her perspective was really a lot about raising boys as opposed to girls, involving a lot of creative play and time outdoors and things like that. She talked a lot about her son, Garrett, who has done a couple of community-based art projects. So our creative exercise for this episode was kind of taking a page out of his book, which was to create in a series. And so the idea here is to take a theme or a photograph or a poem and create 2 or 3 items from that idea. So maybe your theme would be springtime. And so you do several different photographs. You could do several different spring-like collages, that kind of thing. And so that was how that went. You just heard my computer say, you forgot to plug me in. So sorry for that interruption. Now it's getting juice again. All these little things that happen, right? So in episode 6, I spoke to my friend Annie Marshall. She is the owner and founder of Veggie Annie. She raised a very creative daughter, and we talked together about using varied and open play times, especially so your children can explore textures and colors and ideas. We talked a lot about how to talk to children about what they've made, especially if you don't know what it is. That the wording to use to get them to maybe talk about what they made, but to not in any way discourage the creative juice, or to say, oh, is that a blank, a house, a barn, a dog, a cat, but to have them use their language at whatever developmental level that they are at in order to share their creation with you. The creative exercise for this time was called a jar of, and this is something that I talk with all 3 of my friends, Annie, Dallas, and Kirsten, is to having supplies at your fingertips and available. And so the creative exercise of this episode was called a jar of. That could be a jar of markers or pencils or crayons, to have a pad of paper. Having those items available out where your family congregates means that there can be serendipitous creating that can happen at any time. And so that is a wonderful way to get in the habit of bringing creativity into our everyday lives, and especially for our kids. And the final episode of our little mini series on creative kids was with my friend Kirsten, who's a homeschool mom. She's a teacher, Waldorf teacher, a creative and really, really deep thinker. And we talked a lot about making sure that your creative and play areas are not locked away in a basement or in an attic, but that they are right in the center of where your family congregates, that they are integrated in the home, and how that makes it so that your it shows to everyone in the family that you value creativity, you value play, and that it is part of your daily activity. And the creative exercise this time was make a huge mess. And that can be actually making a mess, like pull out all your creative supplies and make something. It could be but it didn't have to be like a mess. It could also be like dance, like no one is watching. It could be singing at the top of your lungs. It could be, um, what else? It could be going out in nature and running or skipping or jumping, using your body creatively. Again, bringing in these little pieces of creativity all the time, making it part of your daily life, and having some fun and having some play time, whether you are 5 or 55. So then in episode 8, I talked about some of the obstacles to our creativity and how to get around them. And some of these obstacles are like perfectionism, like you can't start anything or finish anything unless it's going to be absolutely perfect and is going to be show ready. And so that can really lead to inertia, where I'm not going to start anything because I just can't do anything. Comparing yourself to others, remembering that when I compare myself to somebody who is posting a picture on Instagram, I'm comparing my insides to their very curated outsides. You know what I'm saying? That whatever, a lot of things that are on Instagram are not showing the big messes. They're showing the big successes of people, and they're not showing the amount of maybe tiny failures or redos or things that happen in real life. And of course, a big obstacle to our creativity is just, again, the lack of time. I gave you some strategies to defeat those obstacles. A lot of times, like with perfectionism, a lot of times what I say to myself is, I'm just going to try this and I'm going to see what happens. And it gives me permission to just go ahead and do it, and to reject the idea that it has to be perfect the first time. So I suggest that you do that. Also, as far as lack of time, again, I think I reiterated this a bunch of times during this series, is eke out 5 minutes a day, eke out 10 minutes a day, and use some of these creative exercises. You could write each of these onto a little slip of paper, put it in a jar, pull one out, especially if you are at that inertia stage where you you're kind of stuck. That pull out, and it says, oh, pick a color and take some photographs. So that's, you have 5 minutes. Okay, I'm going to pick red, and I'm going to go around in my closet and look for everything that's red. I'm going to stage it, and I'm going to take a picture of it. And then I'm going to put it away. So that's like 5 or 7 minutes, right? That could work. And the exercise for this one, there were 2 things on this exercise this time. One was to make a list of everything that could go wrong when you start a project, and everything that could go right when you're starting a project. Again, that's being able to push through that perfectionism. If you write down like worst case scenario, and then you really look at that worst case scenario, sometimes it's not that bad, right? And when you compare that to what could go right when you're starting a new project, kind of like that pros and cons idea, you might just say, well, hey, so much better, so many better things could happen if I just tried this. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it. And I'm going to throw away my ideas of all the things that could go wrong. The second exercise that I suggested that you do was to make a multiplication table. It could also be an addition table. It doesn't have to be multiplication. But a table like that where you have numbers going across and numbers going up and down. But instead of putting in the answer, for instance, on a multiplication table, you'd say 2 times 2, and in the little square, you put 4. So instead, make up answers that are not numbers. So it could be 2 times 2 is love, or 2 times 2 is green, or 2 times 2 is, what else could it be? A bloom or a flower, right? And so again, it's looking at these creatively to come up with answers that don't have anything to do with multiplication, but that have you looking at the world in a different kind of a way. I really like that one. I have not done that one, and I think I am going to sit down and do that one. I challenge you to do that too, and share it with me, please. Again, you can always share it. You can always send it to me in an email, goatherd@flyinggoatfarm.com. You can put it in a comment on my website or a comment here on the podcast itself. All right, so episode 9, avoiding burnout and finding your inspiration. So, where does burnout come from? A lot of from the research that I've looked at, a lot of times burnout comes, it's just a natural part of the cycle of creating. When you are the cycle of creating, first you come up with these ideas come welling up out of your mind, your soul, your heart. You then get into a area where then you are actually creating with your hands, and it becomes a finished product. And then on the backside, you need time to rest. A lot of times, if you do those cycles, a lot of time, many cycles like this, and you do not give yourself time to rest, that's when burnout happens. I know that for me, especially like right before Maryland Sheep and Wool, right before the fall shows like Rhinebeck, I'm creating, and I reach a stage where after that show is done, I need time to just sit back, no more dyeing, no more thinking about color, nothing like that. I need time to renew myself, and I need time to regroup. And it's really important to give yourself that time and that compassion to know when it's time to rest and rejuvenate. I also gave you a whole bunch of ideas of where you can find inspiration when you're just not feeling it. And I talked about finding your creative tribe, whether that's a guild in the area, whether that's finding a knitting circle at your local yarn store, or whether that's finding a group at the library that is knitting, crocheting, or they could be quilting, or they could be, maybe it's a photography group. A lot of times you can get inspiration by the people that are around you. And my creative exercise this time was to change it up. So what I mean by that is try new things. Again, this is a way to find more inspiration, and it's a time to kind of avoid that burnout. So maybe you decide to make a new recipe, or you go to a new restaurant that's in town, or you read a book that isn't your usual go-to genre. I really like reading mysteries and thrillers, but if when I reach a burnout and I need to rejuvenate, I typically like to go for some other genre. Maybe it's a family drama, maybe it's a comedic novel, something like that, just so that you are doing something out of your usual. Maybe you go and watch a foreign film or see one on Netflix, and maybe you listen to a music genre that's new to you. Maybe instead of listening to your kids or grandkids hip hop, you turn on some gospel, or you turn on some classical guitar, something like that. Something that is new and different, that's going to make different connections in your brain, and is going to, and therefore, be stimulating to your mind and your creativity. And last time, I talked about um, the different kinds of creativity, and basically about um, creativity when you're an amateur or a professional, or what I would call sacred creativity. And when I'm talking about amateur creativity, that could be construed as being um, snotty or superior, and that's not what I mean. But there's a certain level of, or a certain kind of creativity when you are an amateur and you're making things for yourself and for other people, and it's just so much fun, and you're learning so many new things, and you're only doing it for your own enjoyment. And that's really the definition of an amateur, is someone who is doing an activity merely for their own enjoyment. And that's what I mean by amateur in this arena. When you're a professional, you have a different kind of creativity. You're also having, for myself, speaking of myself, I can have that amateur creativity and make things for myself or my family just for the fun of it. But I also have this level of professional creativity where I'm making things for other people. So that is like using a different part of my brain, kind of. When you're making something for somebody else, you are many times having to suspend maybe what you would naturally gravitate to, in order to have it be something that a particular person would want, if it's a commission, or something that a group of people would want. And then there's the sacred creativity, and that is just something, yeah, that's creativity that's coming directly from your soul, that's deeply personal. It's usually highly symbolic, and it's very, very nurturing. And to make time and space in your world for that kind of creativity is also, I think, really valuable. Has been for me. Also, in this episode, I talked about entering your work for a show or competition. And my best advice for that is, if this is your first time, to enter something that is not juried, to put something in the skein and garment at Sheep and Wool, or at Rhinebeck, or any other fiber festival where you can enter your work and it's not in a juried situation. You could also enter your work in a county fair. There's so many things that you can do in a county or the state fair level. They take quilts and weaving and pickles and pies and cake decorating and woodworking and all kinds of things that, whatever is your thing, photography, whatever is your thing, you can enter that for a small fee, and you get your work out there and shown and seen by other people. And you might even get a ribbon. That's the icing on the cake. But really, it's wonderful to just get your work out there to be seen by other people. And the more experiences that you have with that, the more you will be able to grow in that kind of arena and enter more high stakes shows in the future. And the final exercise that I had you do was all about alignment. Because we have learned, if you have done all the exercises, then you've probably learned a lot about yourself. You've learned a lot about your creativity. So in this exercise, I wanted you to make an alignment list. And so with that, you would make 3 columns on a piece of paper or in a notebook. And the first column would be a list of what you love to do. And just keep writing until you can't think of anything else. You can have 50 things on that list. You could have 100 things on that list. The middle column is things that you're good at doing, whether you love them or not. You know, you may be good at cooking, but maybe you don't love cooking, you know? So maybe cooking wouldn't be in your first column, but if you're good at it, it should be in your second column, right? And this is a way of making sure that what you're doing is aligning what you love to do and what you're good at doing. And then your third column is things that you would like to learn more about. Maybe there's a class that you've always wanted to take, or a teacher that you've always wanted to study with. And so this kind of list is a great place to where it all kinds of comes together into an alignment, and it will really help you take off and spread your creative wings. So we'll see where you've been and where you potentially want to go. And this kind of exercise is something too that you would probably want to do once every couple years or so, because there may be things that are on that third column, which is things you'd like to learn more about. And maybe in a couple years, maybe you've already done them, and so they need to come off the list and either go into, you know, what you love to do or what you're good at doing, or they need to be erased because you tried it, you've been there, you hated it. And so take it off the list and add other things in that now, 2 years later, you would like to learn more about. So that can kind of be a working document for your creative life. So that's where I leave you with creativity. We had a great 5 or 6 months doing this. Again, I hope you've done some or all of the exercises. I hope that you feel more creative. I hope that you feel better and more hopeful about raising creative kids and have gotten some great ideas. I'll be taking a few weeks off to regroup myself. And when we come back next season, which will be, I think, in April. I haven't come up with an actual date yet, but I'll keep you posted. I'm going to be focusing on my next season 4, on how our textile choices and all the other purchasing choices we make, how they affect the environment, how they affect farmers, how they affect climate change, and focusing on the steps of that you can take to help heal our planet through your textile choices. Basically, I'm going to be really delving deep into the fiber shed movement. As you know, for the last 2 years, I've been really working hard to come up with fiber shed products along in my line, and which I have done. But now I really want to delve into why is this important? How is it important? And knowing that not everybody can just start a whole new wardrobe today, but rather to, you know, what steps can we take daily or weekly or yearly to make better choices. So I'm excited about that, and that will be when I come back in season 4. So until then, happy making.